Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Lexie Millikan, Executive Director of the Quilts of Valor Foundation. Lexie is an artist, educator, and curator. She received her BFA with a focus in fiber, installation, and social practice at the Kansas City Art Institute in Kansas City, Missouri. Along with her work with the Quilts of Valor Foundation, she also has an active studio practice in which she teaches classes, exhibits her own artwork, and continues to learn more about art and craft. Lexie has worked extensively with the UNESCO Creative Cities Network, and through this has met makers throughout the world. A nonprofit she worked for, the Yeiser Art Center, won the Governor's Award in the Arts for Community Programming, and she was also twice nominated for Young Leader of Western Kentucky. Lexie makes her home in Marion, Kentucky, and when not working, she enjoys riding motorcycles with her husband and hiking with their dogs. Hello, Lexie, and welcome to So and So.
Hi, Meg. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you today.
You know, I'm thrilled to have you on. We have had representatives from Quilts of Valor on other So and So episodes, just talking briefly about what you all do. But you and I met in person at Bernina University, and we are very honored to have you with us today, talking about you and the work that you do in Quilts of Valor. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I'm going to jump right in and say you have a very interesting and vibrant background. Um, how did you learn to sew?
Well, I actually learned a little bit later in life. I dabbled, I would say, in it as a kid, but I didn't have necessarily a teacher like some people do with a mom or grandma. I actually learned in college. I had a really wonderful quilting teacher named Kim Eichler Messmer, and I was in a fiber program at the Kansas City Art Institute, and that's when I really got excited about quilting, was in that program.
So tell us about your quilt making and some of your favorite creations.
So I would say that my quilt making is a little bit off the wall at times. It wouldn't be considered traditional, although I really like to use traditional techniques. I like to sort of push those in a different direction. So I really enjoy improvisational piecing. I'm not great at following patterns, and so I like to make up my own patterns as I go along. And then I really enjoy using either found fabric or fabrics that I have over dyed with natural dyes and sort of create something new from old materials.
Do you have a specific favorite quilt you can tell us about?
I have one that I made recently for a show in Missouri that I really think turned out interesting. I used a really large, vintage doily that I over dyed with indigo
Hmm.
dye, and I incorporated a lot of other sort of floral patterned vintage textiles that either came from family members or friends or were just found at thrift shops. And I layered all of these pieces together into a sort of abstract piece that has definitely some floral themes and incorporates some indigo dyed material. So I actually did it as a tie quilt, and I used yarn that was made in Kentucky, well, grown in Kentucky, and then also
Sure.
dyed with indigo that was grown in Kentucky.
So, as you said, not your conventional quilt.
Right.
So your degree from the Kansas City Art Institute, you focused on fiber installation and social practice. These are interesting. So can you tell us about these areas of focus and how they apply to your work?
Sure. So the fiber department was a really expansive department. So we got to learn about, of course, quilting and weaving and dyeing, but we also had classes in paper making and entrepreneurship and sculptural textiles and design and fashion. And so I got to learn about a lot of different areas in the textile world, which I think was perfect for me because I'm interested in all of those things. And
Hmm.
I like to continue to learn about all of those things. And when I was learning about installation, I liked the idea of creating a whole environment around someone, either in a gallery or out in a public space. And then with the social practice aspect, I was really excited about bringing people into that art and craft work in a different way where they could participate. Um, Maybe they could make the artwork, or they were learning, or they had some sort of activity that was going on outside of just looking at artwork. And so that became an important thing in my practice, where I was really excited about that education and about engaging people in a different way with textiles. And so a lot of my work became much more interactive. So I had things like uh, yardage dyeing parties where people could come in and dye fabric or paint on fabric, and things that were just a little bit more interactive than just looking at textiles.
So it seems like a lot of this is helping you in your active studio practice. And you do this in addition to your work with Quilts of Valor. And in your practice, you teach, you exhibit your art. What do you teach, and what artworks do you exhibit? And where can people find these exhibits?
So I have taught everything from indigo dye to weaving to quilting. Again, I have such varied interests within textiles. I really enjoy teaching all different kinds of textile practices, and part of that is, sharing traditions that I'm afraid, eventually aren't going to be shared anymore. So that's an important thing. And then I think just letting people enjoy and learn how things are made is important to me as well. And so I teach sometimes in high school settings, sometimes in college settings, sometimes in community workshops. I'm actually getting ready to teach a quilting class to high school students in Nashville, Tennessee. And then I exhibit my work as I am able to and have time and am invited to. And I recently had an exhibition. Actually, I had two exhibitions in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. One was at the school there, the university there, and one was at the Southeast Missouri Arts Council Gallery. So
Hmm.
those were two shows that I had back to back, which it's a good thing to have a deadline to create some new work. That's always helpful for me.
Sure, sure. You certainly have full days.
Hmm.
You have worked, and I want to focus on this because I think it's important. You've worked with the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. So for those who don't know what UNESCO is, or the Creative City Network, can you explain it to us and tell us about its mission?
Sure. So the UNESCO Creative Cities Network sometimes gets confused with the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but while they're similar, I would say in the goal of highlighting certain regions of the world, they are different. The UNESCO Creative Cities Network is meant to highlight cities that have a focus on art and sustainability and supporting artists and offering opportunities for artists. And so I got involved in this network because Paducah, Kentucky is actually a UNESCO creative city. And
Hmm.
so the city has to apply for this status and show what they're doing to promote the arts in the area. And so it's a rigorous process to get through. Um, Paducah just celebrated their 10-year anniversary last year of this designation, and through this network, I've gotten to work with people from all over the world to learn about what they're doing in their areas, and then show them what we're doing in Kentucky.
And Paducah, just as a reminder, is home of the amazing National Quilt Museum. So that distinction really is wonderful for the home of that marvelous place. Now,
Yeah.
when when I introduced you, I said you got to meet makers all over the world through
Hmm.
this work. Would you share a couple memorable experiences or talk about some of the people you've met?
Certainly. Actually, really the first project I did with UNESCO was for a festival that was happening in San Cristobal de las Casas, which is in Chiapas, Mexico. And they have a festival called Sabores y Saberes. And they invited some representatives from Paducah to share some of our culture at this festival. And so we had a local chef that traveled there, some musicians that traveled there, and then I was asked to create about 250 indigo dyed napkins for a dinner, a collaborative dinner that was going to be part of this event. So I was really excited to take this project on, and I just turned my studio into an indigo dye studio for a few weeks to get this project accomplished. And then I packed a really big suitcase full of these napkins to take down to the festival, and it was a really, really neat event. And like I said, that was kind of my first thing that I did with the network. And I went on to exhibit some of my artwork in Jinju, South Korea at a UNESCO event there. um, I made a lot of connections in South Korea and was actually able to coordinate some musicians to go back there for another festival, for a arts festival, um, the following year. And then actually, I'm trying to think, more recently, I went to Spain and taught quilting methods at a festival there, and that was really a lot of fun. There's a city there called Manises, and they have a lot of ceramic artists. That's their history. And so I took a whole bunch of quilting supplies, and they have a festival there in July, and so I got to teach quilting to just the festival goers, and that was really great.
So it sounds like you're still very active in this.
Yeah, as much as I can be. Of course, it takes a lot of time and coordination. But like I said, I've made connections in a lot of other countries, and
Hmm.
I love working on projects with people from other parts of the world because you learn so much about other people's culture through their art and craft. And it's wonderful to see when there are really big differences, and then it's also really nice to see when there are similarities that you can share. A ceramic artist in Spain and a fiber artist from the United States have a lot of sort of similar skill sets, I would say. And so
Hmm.
it's been really fun to work with people from all over the world and learn more about their cultures, and then be able to share that in the United States.
So let's change topics here a little bit. I want to talk about Quilts of Valor.
Yeah.
This amazing organization has been in existence since 2003, thanks to the efforts of Catherine Roberts. So, would you share the story of how Quilts of Valor came to be?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So Catherine Roberts is the founder of Quilts of Valor. And when her son was deployed in 2003, she had a literal dream about a soldier that was deployed to a war zone. Of course, I'm sure she was thinking a lot about her son at that time.
Hmm.
And in her dream, uh, the soldier was just despondent, and she saw this quilt being wrapped around him as a way to comfort him. And so that idea of a quilt bringing comfort to a soldier that was in a war zone, um, was something that she decided to share and move forward with. And so it really started out as a grassroots effort to bring comfort and healing to veterans and service members, and it just spread all across the country.
So, you are the executive director. First of all, how did you come to be executive director?
Well, I had the opportunity to apply for the position when it opened up, and I was excited because of the background that I have in quilting and sort of the experience that I have working for nonprofits. It seemed like a good fit for me, and it's a really rewarding job.
Tell us about your job. What do you do as executive director?
So we have over 11,000 members all across the country. And those members are the ones that are making the quilts and awarding them to the service members and veterans. And so in each state, we have coordinators. We have state coordinators and then regional coordinators. And of course, we have our Quilts of Valor staff that works remotely. And so I work with our staff to help support those coordinators that are really working with the members who are making the quilts. And we have an office in Winterset, Iowa, which is outside of Des Moines. And we have a couple of staff members in that office. And occasionally I work out of the office as well. But we have so many people all across the country working towards our mission that it's really part of my job to keep that communication going between everyone.
And what I love on your website is you don't talk about how many people you've served, but you talk about how many you've comforted, and that truly is the work that you all do. Why is this work so important?
I think that people join the military for a lot of different reasons. And of course, when there was the draft, that was a very different situation. But there's a lot of complicated emotions wrapped up in military service, and sometimes people don't get recognition when they come back when they've made these really difficult sacrifices, and I think that can be really isolating. And, I think it's just really nice to be able to recognize people for their service and to show them that there are people that care about them, that are thinking about them, and that want them to feel that comfort and healing.
Can you tell us how the program works and how people can get involved?
Of course. Um, so anyone can nominate someone to receive a Quilt of Valor. And you can do that. The easiest way to do that is through our online nomination form that can be found at qovf.org. And we also are always excited to have new members, people that want to make quilts for Quilts of Valor. You can make a quilt and donate it to a local group. You can be involved in an award ceremony if there's someone that you know personally in your life that you think would like to have a Quilt of Valor. You can help coordinate that through a local group. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. We have members that only sew blocks for us. There are our block builders, and they just make blocks, and then those get made into quilts somewhere else down the line. And then we have groups that are, we have some groups that are really small. We have some groups that are really big. So our quilters participate in a lot of different ways and sort of at the level that makes sense for them.
So, can you tell us about any of the memorable moments with the people who were recipients of some of these quilts?
Yeah, of course, our award ceremonies can be very emotional. And, we hear a lot from veterans about, just this recognition. They didn't even know that they needed it. Sometimes I think they don't know how emotional it's going to be until the ceremony is actually happening. But we had an award ceremony in, I think it was Branson, Missouri, and there was a Vietnam veteran there who um, he said that this was the first time that anyone had ever recognized his service, and because it was such a contentious time when he came back after being drafted, he didn't feel good about it because no one had ever told him that that they cared about him, and that they were thinking about him after he came home. So hearing that, that he's carried that
Hmm.
his whole life, and he just had tears streaming down his face during, while he was telling me this. I mean, it is something that really impacts people.
And I want to go a step further because your work is very personal because your sister is actually a veteran who served in the Army National Guard and was deployed as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Would you tell us about your sister and the sacrifices her family and all the families of those who serving make?
Yeah, my sister, she's a really incredible, strong woman, and I don't want to speak for her, but when we were younger, we had kind of limited opportunities. Where we were living, we grew up in both rural Idaho and rural South Dakota, and so she joined the National Guard when she was in high school. She was really looking for some opportunities, and I think thinking about her future and getting some experience. And she ended up being deployed, and she was so young. I want to say she was maybe 21 when she was deployed, and I'm younger than her. I'm a couple years younger than her, and so, it was really challenging time for our family because it was so early in that conflict that, it was hard to communicate with her. We would go quite a while without hearing from her, and, she actually had a young son at the time, and, that was a really big challenge that she had to overcome being away from her son. And I think she's a really incredible person for getting through that, for making that sacrifice. And then, coming back home, and she had actually worked as a civilian for a lot of years with the National Guard. And, it's a complicated thing for families that are supporting their service members. And, I understand exactly what Catherine Roberts was feeling when you can't reach your soldier. You don't know how they're doing, and you just are sitting and thinking about them and wondering what they're going through. So I have a lot of respect for my sister. And there are so many veterans out there that I think don't get recognized. And a lot of those are female veterans. I think there are assumptions made about veterans, and that's just not the case. There is a diversity of veterans just as much as there's diversity of people in our country.
So, having lived this personally and then serving families and people in the military, help us understand what we can do to support these families outside of the work with Quilts of Valor. But what do we need to understand to be supportive?
Um, I think that showing your support through something like Quilts of Valor goes such a long way. I think, military families have a lot of challenges, and it's something that's hard to understand unless you're right in the middle of it. But just kind words of
Hmm.
encouragement go such a long way. And that's what I found with my work with Quilts of Valor is, just that recognition of someone's service, of what someone has gone through, I think really makes a big difference.
Lexi, what's next for you?
That's a good question. I'm continuing my work with Quilts of Valor. I always have projects going on in my studio. I always have classes that I'm thinking about teaching. I think the biggest thing is I'm continuing to learn and grow. I don't think I'll ever um, reach that point where I've said, oh, I don't want to learn anything else about textiles. It's something that
Hmm.
I love learning about. I love, expanding my knowledge and my network. And, one of the quilts that I'm working on right now is, a project that I've had going for a few months. Of course, it's one of those projects that, should have been finished a long time ago, but, it actually is a quilt that incorporates, fabric from a whole bunch of the creative cities that I've visited or have connections with through the network. So I really like the idea of incorporating textiles from different places and people to create this sort of bigger picture. So I'm working on some things like that in my studio, and I'm just going to see where that goes.
So, in addition to what's next, what's your dream?
That's a tough one. I
Hmm.
think I have a lot of dreams. I think that my dream is to have a studio practice that, that I can really focus on and expand and spend time, working.
That sounds like a good answer. Just spend time working. We can call it at that. Okay. So in our conversation today, we talked about a lot of things. Is there a question I didn't ask that you wish I had?
I think you asked a lot of really good questions, Meg. And when you asked about how I started sewing, I think that one thing I wanted to mention is I had very encouraging parents who really wanted my sister and I to learn how things were made and how things worked in the world. And so I think that is such an important part of how I got to the place that I'm at, that my parents were always doing some kind of project around the house that was very DIY, trying to, figure things out, make things, being creative, um and I think growing up in that kind of environment really helped lead me to where I am. So, my dad actually had a weaving loom, and he made wool horse blankets and rugs, and my mom helped with that business.
Hmm.
And that was when I was pretty young. But that kind of idea of making has always been a part of my life, I think. And sometimes, when something's right in front of you, you don't really see it, and then later in life you recognize that. And I think that's something that I've, over the past few years, I've really realized how much those kinds of things had an effect on what I wanted to do, what I was excited about doing. And I think that's what it comes down to, is understanding how and why people make things with their hands. And
Hmm.
that's quilts are just such an incredible part of our history, in this country, something that is so personal and special to people. And so I just, I love the all of the work that goes into quilts, whether they're functional or decorative, if they're meant to be on display or if they're meant to be on your bed. I just I absolutely love textiles. So that's just a little bit about my history of how I got here.
It's what I'm hearing is that you love the what, the creation of things, but the why of what's behind it, and that's awesome, Lexi. We've got a lot to look forward to see coming from you in the future. Do you have a personal website where people can go and look at your work?
Yeah, I do, and this will be a good motivation to update that. It's
Okay, there you
it
go.
it it is, it's actually my first and middle name, so it's lexieabra.com. It's lexieabra.com.
All right.
And my maiden name was Johnson, and so that was, I couldn't ever have anything with my maiden name because that was always taken. So when I was starting out in my art career, I had to use my first and middle name because Johnson was always taken.
Sure. So it's lexieabra.com to see your personal work.
Yes.
And then if our listeners would like to reach out to you again about Quilts of Valor, what's the best way for them to do that?
So, Quilts of Valor, you can email me at lexie.millikan@qovf.org. And you can also reach out through our website. We have a lot of information there. We have our nomination form there, and we have some different ways to reach out through the website as well, depending on how you're wanting to get involved.
Lexi, this has been wonderful. I have so enjoyed talking to you today and hearing your story. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Meg. It's been great talking to you. I appreciate you having me.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.